Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 31st of March, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me here in the studio. We have Diane Rasmussen McAdie joining us by live link from Scotland. Well, today we're going to get started with really the march to war, very serious times for UK. And let's just have a look at some of the propaganda that's been unleashed on the nation in order to get us into war. What better place to start than with Keir Starmer addressing the troops?
I'm really clear in my mind that if there is a deal, and I hope there is, everybody wants a peaceful outcome, a lasting peace, not least the Ukrainians, but that will only be lasting, that will only be peaceful, it will only leave Ukraine secure and sovereign if there is security arrangements in place to ensure that if there's a deal, it is a defended deal. And that's why the work that we're doing here is so important. We know one thing for certain, which is a deal without anything behind it is something that Putin will breach. We know that because it's happened before, and I'm absolutely clear in my mind it will happen again.
Well, Ben, I don't know about you, I find that sort of thing very difficult to watch because he's using the military personnel behind him as a prop for his image. But of course, his real objective is to continue the war with the Russians. He doesn't want the peace. This is very clear. And of course, most of those military personnel will simply have a head full of the briefings that they've had from within the Ministry of Defence and, of course, by Defence Intelligence. We're going to be coming on to DI in a moment. But I've got a second clip of Keir Starmer. And in this one, well, he's quite wobbly over something which is very simple. And I think there's a reason why. Let's have a look.
Now is not the time for pulling back or weakening on sanctions. On the contrary, now is the time for increasing sanctions on Russia to get them to the table to these negotiations to the hope of a ceasefire and a lasting and secure ceasefire that preserves the security and sovereignty of Ukraine.
I found that very interesting. Ben, he stumbles over what should have been an easy statement to do with the route for peace. And I think this is because he hasn't got it in his mind. So it's a scam up front that Keir Starmer is working for cessation of the hostilities, the brutal deaths on the front line in Ukraine. He mixes up his words because his real objective is to keep that war going so that he can try and strengthen the UK's position in Ukraine and the position of the Western forces. Now, the next image will pop up on slide, but I have to qualify it because this is not the genuine BBC News headline. They had a very soft headline here saying that Germany had decided to forget its history, when the reality is that Germany's apparently decided to forget 2 million World War II dead. That's basically German soldiers dead on the Eastern Front and 3.4 million wounded. And Germany is now preparing for round two. And I'm just going to bring in the journalist from this article. It's Sarah Rainsford. This is the lady who was actually kicked out of Russia as a result of the Russians pushing back against what they regarded as subversion by British authorities in Russia itself. And she felt very aggrieved by this, but the reality was that the Russians had had enough of soft propaganda. But basically in the article, there's no mention of BBC Media Action. That's the BBC charity's work within Ukrainian society to reframe Ukrainian society in the woke model of UK in the West. And of course, that is also soft subversion by BBC Media Action. Now, what the BBC article did go on to say is that we should really take account of what Charlotte and Ludwig had to say, because in the article, these two 18-year-olds, and I'm going to say innocents in the game, they apparently see the need to boost defence spending in Germany. So the BBC would have us in UK believe what these two very, very young people have to say in Germany in order that we're going to help the Germans push through defence spending, presumably to kick off the next round on the Eastern Front. But of course, what do this young man and lady know? Nothing, due to their age, and certainly only what they've been told. So the BBC, soft propaganda being thrown down the throats of people in UK in order to get the war. And this was the nub of the article. It was the head of the Bundeswehr, General Carsten Brewer, and he's saying quite simply to the German people, are you ready for war? And the BBC article even mentions the fact there's been some criticism of this man because he's been travelling around in local areas telling people that they need to prepare for war. Some people have pushed back and said he's scaring them. So I'm just going to bring that up on screen. But this German senior military officer is calling for subscription in Germany in order to have a massive boost in numbers for the German army because he says prepare for war. But here in UK, of course, we've got our own politicians clamouring for war, and no better place to go than Mr. Ellwood. Let's remind ourselves of what he was saying just a little while ago.
Do you feel that the time for debate has actually passed? Is that what you're saying? That it's not really a question of opinion now, it's simply a matter of we have to get boots on the ground and therefore we have to have conscription?
Yes, I mean, that's the backdrop to this, is that we've entered a new era of insecurity. Our world is getting more dangerous, not less. Russia's aggression is rising. It's increasingly backed by China. The United States is actually dialing back from its interests in Europe, and we are increasingly vulnerable, and we must prepare. There's been a big debate about increasing defence spending to 2.5%. We can't afford to keep a large standing army. So this is all about increasing our national readiness, this latent capability that we can tap into at any time.
Latent capability, Ben. What he's talking about is sending young men and women to the slaughter on the Eastern Front. But Tobias is considerably younger than I am. He's a big man. He's done his military training, including with reserve special forces positions, as I understand it. So my question is, Mr. Ellwood, why don't you go to the front and help the Ukrainians fight the Russians on the front line? Is that an unreasonable request, do you think, Ben?
I think that sounds about right, Brian. Latent capability, that's an astonishing term. It's a new one to me. Have you heard that before?
I haven't, but it is so unbelievably callous because, as I say, that capability is to send young British men and women to the slaughter on the Ukrainian front as part of UK's proxy war. Now, if you want to know how this scene has been set up, let's just have a look at some of the things that the Ministry of Defence is putting out. This is utter propaganda, but just think of this post. It's what the defence spending increase means, and defence spending increase is all based on the need to continue the proxy war against Russia. But look at what they're saying. Homes fit for heroes, more innovative equipment, driving jobs and growth in the economy. So if we prepare for war, we're going to get better homes and better jobs and a better economy. There seems to me to be a few weaknesses in this mad and very dangerous philosophy. But if we get deeper into who's supposed to monitor and control not only effectively the intelligence services, but the Ministry of Defence and their relationship with intelligence, we come to the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. Now, their reports are well behind, and there's a reason for that. In fact, this is one of the issues that I'm going to be touching on at the On Location conference in Cheltenham this weekend. So if you haven't got a ticket, you might like to purchase a ticket from us. But if we get deeper into what they're talking about, here is Defence Intelligence itself. Look at this incredible budget, £371 million. And amongst other things, what's this organisation doing? Well, I've labelled this from analysis to propaganda. So it says that Defence Intelligence has apparently provided substantial analysis and assessment on Russia's invasion of Ukraine, providing forewarning of Russia's intent to customers across government, It's being provided to customers across government, to international partners, to parliamentarians and the general public. General public, of course, come last. And then DI's work has informed decisions made by ministers and armed forces chiefs on the UK's posture towards Russia and the provision of lethal and non-lethal aid to Ukraine. Nothing about British soft power undermining Ukrainian society and antagonising the Russians to help foment the war. But this is the killer information here. It says some of DI's reporting has been produced for public release. The impact of DI's daily Ukraine Twitter campaign with an unprecedented level of activity and presence on Twitter was substantial. In terms of penetration, this has become the best performing social media campaign of the Ministry of Defence. Well, I've been talking about that Twitter campaign for a very long time. It's sheer propaganda. Let's remind ourselves by having a look at a few of their clips.
We believe in you. You are our hope. We are fighting to survive. Just we don't have any other choice. If we won't fight, we won't live like as a nation, as a country. We will disappear.
So this is all emotion. This is playing on the heartstrings of the nation in UK with no detail about how the war in Ukraine was created and fomented. Let's have a look at another clip here where we're praising ourselves for training people to go and be slaughtered on the Eastern Front.
Take care. Down.
You agree with me?
You're a great man yourself. Yes.
Okay.
I hope because you're more ancient.
And I'm going to play two more just to really emphasise what has been thrown at the UK population in the so-called penetration of this defence intelligence campaign. And this was complete nonsense about Russian casualties. Let's have a look at this Ministry of Defence cartoon. So for those of you just listening in, what was being shown was a cartoon conveyor belt of Russian troops simply being slaughtered and dropping off the end of the conveyor belt, when in fact the way that the Russians have played the Ukrainian war has been very careful husbandry of manpower on the battlefield, because the overall casualties on both sides have been so high. And the last one is a pathetic clip claiming a while ago that the Russians were going to lose because they were going to run out of water. So that one talking about the Russians having to drink out of puddles in order to prosecute the war because they're so incompetent. Sheer nonsense, utter propaganda. But the truth is coming to the surface. And thank you very much to the viewer pointed me to this Telegraph article when we've got facts now coming to the surface. British commandos helped bring the CIA into the heart of the Ukraine war. And it's talking about Ben Wallace being accused of ordering the sacking of a Ukrainian general. So no doubt who's been running the battle and who's been following the orders. But if we get into the text here, and the investigation, well, the paper is saying that they've conducted 300 interviews with government, military and intelligence sources. And the key point here is that they say that according to the investigation, Britain placed small teams of officers in Ukraine, unlike the Americans. And so basically we put small groups of officers who were fighting the war with and for the Ukrainians. They were spread across the country, and this gave British military planners relatively more clout over the Americans. But an earlier report I had of this article, you can see part of the headline, the CIA and the heart of the Ukraine war. The investigation into UK-US operation to aid Kiev raises concerns that the West is fighting a, quote, proxy war with Russia. And this is the absolute truth. And if we bring in this one here, this is going back to 2022. Again, we can see the British military being used and to prosecute the war. And if I come into to end on this one, basically, I was stunned at this image where we see the Defence Secretary and Radakin and politicians laughing and joking at the sight of a drone, which of course is ultimately going to be killing and maiming people on the front. So they want to go to war, but it's a joke. They're like children with a new toy. I think we'll leave it there, but I think it's clear that the country at the moment is in the hands of some very dangerous people, and their objective, if the public allows it, is war. Diane, welcome to the news. Take us into a new subject, but I think I'm right in saying that fear is still part of what you're seeing here.
Thanks, Brian, and hello, Ben. Happy to be here today. So yeah, I have a report on an exhibition that was called Injecting Hope, but I'm going to call it Injecting Fear. And the reason for this is the topic of the exhibition is called The Race for a COVID-19 Vaccine, originally curated by the Science and Industry Museum in London, and it's traveling around the UK. Currently, it's up here in Edinburgh, and it's at the National Museum of Scotland until the 27th of April, in case you really want to see this. But trust me, I went, so you don't have to. It's part of a project with museums in India and the Guangdong Science Center in China. And this has been going around since 2022. And it's free to enter. So I decided to visit the exhibition. I wouldn't have paid for this. It was my birthday on Friday. So I guess I was hoping I would inject some hope into myself. But really, I just had anger and fear injected by the time I left, honestly. Let's go through my visit to the exhibition first with some footage that I took there. And then I will give my report on it. So I've got a picture here of the entrance of it as well, the entrance going into the museum. There's all of this propaganda, the yellow slide and everything. So once you go into the exhibition itself, once you pass into the front doors, you see this Injecting Hope in big, scary red letters. There's a photo of me standing next to it, as well as the start of a lot of the propaganda that I went through all the way through the whole thing. Another photo here showing me standing next to another piece of propaganda that's to the right of that propaganda, saying, "Stay home, essential travel only, and save lives." And I don't know if you can see it, but I was wearing my UK column hoodie. It was very nice to be able to wear that inside this exhibition. So after you pass through that, there's a gauntlet of dystopian propaganda to get to the exhibition. And that's a photo of it. I made a video of what it actually sounds like and feels like. So if we can play that video now, please.
Major London hospital has become the first in the UK to announce
encourages everyone to help civil to stay
Number one of my team show, 30-minute workout every single day, Monday to Friday. I'm going to be your PE teacher for the nation. So I'm not something to the name. And I want to say massive thanks to everyone who shared it, for its teachers.
Diane, if I can just come in there, I'm looking at that. Am I seeing images on a ceiling as well? There's a lot of images being thrown at young people, children, whoever goes into that exhibition.
Yes, absolutely. On there's the photographs, the different monitors, I guess they are, with playing all those videos on both sides of you walking through that hallway and up on the ceiling, which that's why I tried to get that into the video. So you're basically surrounded everywhere except the floor through all of this horrible propaganda. And I can guarantee you there's no UK column anywhere in any of the screens. So by the time you pass through that, you have to get through all of those entry stages to get into the exhibition itself. And this, I've got some links in the show notes if you want to read more about it, but it's basically got objects that were collected during the so-called peak of the pandemic. So-called highlights include the vial of the first COVID-19 vaccine to be administered worldwide. So you see the needle, different items of artwork and so on. So what I did is I have a whole bunch of photos that I took, and I've put together this into a just under 2-minute video. And in the background, I recorded at the end of the exhibition, there's a recording of a book called I Remember by Alec Finlay, which is a very long communal memory of the pandemic and composed for Scotland's COVID Memorial, which is in Pullet Country Park in Glasgow. And it's an entire book, but basically they're playing Robert Carlyle, who was one of the actors in Trainspotting, reading from the book. So I've put together this video. It goes very quickly, but you'll get a feel for what it was like to be there.
I remember a family's fear and anger as they were forced to take their daughter home to die, rather than leave her in the hospice and all. I remember the tears that flowed when my partner showed me the compassion that I couldn't show myself. I remember the support of my colleagues, so kind it made me cry. I remember the clap of honour given to the many volunteers as they filed through the linked corridor of the Glasgow Royal Infirmary. I remember the exhaustion of sleep deprivation in my hospital bed from endless alarm and reply. I remember the sound of my daughter's voice through the door, trying to help me sleep. I remember the triage nurse telling me to die at home instead of hospital. I remember talking on the phone to my brother-in-law and him describing how, at the height of his battle with COVID, he didn't know what century he was living in. I remember the texture of the paint on the wall as I lay on one side. I remember scarcely standing, pick up his down from the doorstep. The thin, weak body and gaunt face of my brother, home after enduring 10 days in HDU, someone worse needed that hospital bed.
Diane, the comments are a surreal hell.
Yeah, that seems accurate. One of the things I want to say as well about the Scottish version, and I've got an article about this that the Times reported, I believe this one from the 8th of March, where there's a Scottish Tory MSP, who's Stephen Kerr, who's really upset about the propaganda that's being displayed. And it's created a bit of a political issue up here in Scotland, because basically it's saying that Scotland was showing the SNP as being sort of the saviors, and it neglected the UK's role in the pandemic, and never mind the fact that, all of the propaganda itself. And a quote from this article from this Tory MSP he sort of said, well, this is an obscene piece of nationalist agitprop, deliberately distorting history to fit a fake news agenda, and called for its contents to be reviewed urgently. And Professor Richard Enos, the chair of Common Knowledge Edinburgh, which of course is my committee, as I've said previously, and he's been on the news previously, he has written a review of the exhibition, which is on our Common Knowledge Edinburgh Substack. You can read the whole thing. It will be in the show notes. He agrees with Stephen Kerr's view. Richard said in his review that he encourages the keeper of the museum to question whether a national museum should be showcasing an exhibition that has been created and funded by charities allied to powerful pharmaceutical business interests to spread their desired message. The National Museum of Scotland should not be presenting propaganda as science. And not to go too far into the details of the funding, but it is important to note that it basically was co-funded by Wellcome and the Ho Family Foundation. So Wellcome is owned by Glaxo, a pharmaceutical company with a huge investment portfolio, and the Ho Family Foundation has promoted this as well. They belong to the trustee of the Ho family. Jan Ho, one of the trustees, is a co-founder of an investment company called Capula Investment Management LLP, which is a global investment company, and they have offices worldwide. And prior to founding Capula, he worked at JP Morgan. So when I went into this exhibition, I was expecting to be angry because using public money to promote propaganda, but I left even angrier because I found out that basically it's another public-private partnership meant to increase, the corporate corruption that we see within the vaccine industry and everything else, all of the money that was made surrounding the pandemic, Brian.
Diane, thank you very much. Many people in our chat box absolutely picked up on this for what it is, what you describe it as is propaganda. Really, really disturbing and disgusting stuff. We're seeing this across the board. But Ben, you're going to take us into here how we've got another big effort by effectively Ofcom ultimately to shut down free speech. Take us into it.
Yes, thank you, Diane, and thank you, Brian. Two really interesting segments to lead into this, because it's all about the story, right? Whoever tells the story rules. Whoever controls the narrative gets to dictate terms to the country. And I'm going to introduce you to a new term, which is epistemic security. It comes from this organisation, Demos, the think tank. We talk about them all the time. They are champions of people, ideas, and democracy, underlined, very important. And they are really calling the shots in terms of government policy right now. They actually brag in their own materials about being behind policies that have been adopted by successive governments over the past 30 years, whether that's Conservative or Labour governments. And they're really leading this change agenda that we're seeing run out across the country right now. They put out a huge amount of material since the new Labour government came in, relating to public-private partnerships, changes to inheritance tax, the transformation of public services through devolution and digitisation, all of which ultimately is about putting more money into the coffers of multinational corporations and more power into the hands of the state. We've spoken about these reports previously, and Demos itself has figured very heavily in column coverage over the years. It was founded by this guy, Sir Jeff Mulgan, former editor of Marxism Today, currently affiliated with UCL in London, the Rockefeller Foundation, also a very close friend of Julian Middleton from Common Purpose, and still actively involved in the Demos ecosystem. And Demos itself is run by this lady, Polly Curtis, who is a former journalist who most recently was at Tortoise Media. And I will just reference this again, because I think this is important in the context of what we're talking about. When she was at Tortoise, she oversaw the release of this podcast, Hoaxed, in 2022 about the satanic ritual abuse case in Hampstead in North London. And as you can guess by the title, this was presented as a hoax, but it missed out key details from medical reports showing that the children had actually been sexually abused in the case. And I find that rather inexplicable, definitely negligent, maybe even a little bit suspicious, Polly, to be honest with you. And of course, she's now issuing reports about what they call epistemic security. This is a new term. It's been introduced into the lexicon. Epistemic security 2029. This came out at the end of February from Demos. fortifying the UK's information supply chain to tackle the democratic emergency. Let's just open that up a little bit, right? So epistemic, not a word that gets used on a daily basis, but what does it mean? It relates to knowledge or cognition. So this is our ability to think and to understand reality. That's what they're going after here. Security is ultimately about reinforcing the establishment narrative. And 2029, I think that's a direct reference to the next UK general election. Yeah, so that's what Demos are pushing for with this report. And if we could just get that back up on screen quickly, fortifying, so that's a defensive action. The information supply chain, which is a very odd way to talk about information and the creation of knowledge. It sounds like a manufactured industrial process, right? And I'll get into that again in a minute. And this is how they sort of think about this stuff. It's very strange. And then they're talking about a democratic emergency. And to me, that suggests that they're scared. They're actually losing control of the narrative as we run into not just the next general election in 4 years' time, but actually, today, tomorrow, this year. And they need that narrative in place in order to get their agenda rolling out as they would like to. So let's just have a quick look at the information supply chain. So this talks about the production, distribution, acquisition, evaluation of information, which is then used to inform decision making and to coordinate action across society, right? And this process, this supply chain map has been basically made up by one of the academics who wrote the report, but then that's now being used to formulate policy, because this stuff gets shared absolutely everywhere across the political networks, across the major parties, across the civil service, into academia. And apparently this process, this supply chain, desperately needs to be managed and controlled more closely by the state. Ultimately, that's what all this ladders up to, right? And that includes through mechanisms like the Online Safety Act. And we can show you how that manifests, actually, because we've received at the column a rather extensive set of questions. How many pages is it?
That's a very good
About
question.
50? No, 70.
No, we're into the 80s and 90s. But
Right.
this shows you what the average media organisation is faced with under the incoming censorship rules from Ofcom. And be under no doubt, this is censorship of free speech.
Yeah.
So many small organisations will drown under this in the first instance, but ultimately there's going to be more legislation to come. And Ben, you're absolutely on the trail of this.
Yeah, exactly. And I've heard stories of numerous small media outlets, small online communities basically say, we can't deal with this, we're going to close, right? And this is all about driving the populace ultimately into the arms of establishment media, establishment controlled technology platforms, right? But apparently that's not enough, right? So we've already got this. That comes from the Online Safety Act. But according to this report, Epistemic Security, UK regulation falls short. One of the conclusions from page 19 is the UK has attempted to regulate online harms, but its legislation falls short in addressing information threats. The UK's Online Safety Act also lacks comprehensive measures. This report was actually issued before the Online Safety Act was even enacted. Yeah, that happened in March. This was issued in February. So they're kind of getting ahead of themselves a little bit here, I think it would be fair to say. And obviously all of this stuff's being done in the name of protecting democracy. Right? So you've got unelected think tanks funded by philanthropic wealth, connected to organizations like the World Economic Forum, as we'll get into, putting forward a policy agenda supposedly to protect people and to protect democracy. And it's really doing the absolute opposite. Where's it coming from? Crucially, so there are a few acknowledgements in the report. We can see there in the first paragraph, it references Polly Curtis, who we talked about, William Perrin, who I'm going to come back to in a moment, but then Professor Lorna Woods, Maeve Walsh, and Judith Townend. So those three ladies at the end there, very difficult to find out much information about who they are. You can't even find images of Maeve Walsh and Lorna Wads online, there's something from this website, which is the Online Safety Act network that they've established, right? What it tells us is that they're both connected to an organisation called Carnegie UK, which is a non-profit. This is a philanthropic fund, which is focused on, amongst other things, producing legislation around what they call online safety. And interestingly, if you look at Lorna Woods' profile in the bottom right, we can see there that she actually received an OBE for her influential work at Carnegie UK that underpinned the UK government's Online Safety Act. So this woman, this individual academic, her work paid for by that charity was used to formulate the legislation. That's where it's come from. It's come from that individual. And they've established this network in order to help organisations that are looking at the implementation of the Act. And let's have a little look at some of these organisations here that are part of that. So again, it's a lot of non-profits, anti-Semitism charities, the Centre for Countering Digital Hate there on the left, Ending Violence Against Women. So they don't actually sort of redefine the meaning of the word violence, which basically means you can't disagree with women on the internet now, apparently. And obviously we're seeing lots more women going into public policy roles, so all of these things are interconnected with each other, and they're all ultimately about shutting down debate. And then this guy who I mentioned again before, this is William Perrin, OBE. He paid for this report to be written. So he's actually acknowledged as the man who paid for the report personally, not from one of his organisations that he's part of. He actually paid for it himself. He's a former policy advisor and private secretary to Tony Blair between 2001 and 2004. He's a trustee of something called the Indigo Trust, which is his own foundation I'm going to talk about next week, and they're actively involved elsewhere in the media ecosystem. It's really important to understand the scope of this. It's absolutely huge what's happening in media at the moment. He's also a trustee at Carnegie UK. He also received an OBE for his work around the Online Safety Act, and he was personally instrumental in setting up Ofcom in the first place. So again, this one individual, unelected, no one really understands what his background is, where he's come from. He's writing the legislation. He's establishing the institutions which are being used to attack organisations like the UK column and ultimately the British people. And we have to understand it like that. And that's being done through official channels. So this all is being overseen by Ofcom. So the first thing you see when you land on their website is enforcing the Online Safety Act. Obviously, we've got a picture of a teenager, a young white man who can't hear things that Auntie doesn't approve of, basically. I think this is the general gist of what we're hearing here. And who's Auntie? So, well, Melanie Dawes, she's the chief exec. She's been there since 2020, was a civil servant before that at various different departments, including work around devolution and local government. She was in the Cabinet Office for a number of years. And also she was a patron of something called the Patchwork Foundation, which is another one of these non-partisan, i.e. uniparty organisations focused on the radical transformation of the country, basically. I mean, you're looking at the total transformation of the nation, demographically, politically, economically, and actually she's part of that organisation. And I think we have to understand that that's probably the agenda that's being pushed here. It's not an agenda that is good for the British people. And interestingly, they've just announced 3 new board members who I'll just draw your attention to, because I think in particular their connections are very important. First one is this, Natalie Black. She's Group Director of Networks and Communications, joined in December last year from Cabinet Office. She's also a visiting professor at the LSE. And importantly, she is a young global leader of the World Economic Forum. Right, so you've got a young global leader of the World Economic Forum in a top executive position, working at Ofcom, implementing this narrative control agenda. Who else? More World Economic Forum links via Tamara Ingram, Deputy Chair now of Ofcom, again appointed in December. So she's a non-exec of Marsh & McLennan, which is a global professional services firm, which is also a World Economic Forum partner. There's a direct link here, again, through Tamara Ingram. She background in advertising. Interestingly, we used to share the same boss. So she reported to a guy for a short period of time who was then went on to be my boss a few years later. And he has some quite funny stories about her, which I can't share on air. But I thought that was an interesting connection. And then finally, Lord Allen, of Hallam, who's the new non-exec at Ofcom, who was before that the Vice President of Public Policy at Facebook. So he spent 10 years at Facebook. Again, another World Economic Forum partner, big tech company, heavy censors, absolutely all over this censorship agenda, working with organizations like Full Fact through the pandemic, that kind of thing. And these are the people that have been put in place at Ofcom in order to control our speech and to deliver an agenda that is basically being controlled by philanthropy and think tanks, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with protecting the best interests of the country, as far as I can tell.
Thank you very much, Ben. And the key to stopping it is for people to understand what's being done, how it's being done, and to expose it. Spread the word. And of course, if you believe in free speech, then Ofcom has got to be dealt with, because Ofcom's objective is as set out, and there's a lot more information to come. Ofcom's objective is to clamp down on free speech so that the only information the public get is effectively government-approved propaganda. Well, let's move on. If you like what the UK column is doing as a free media channel, then please support us. Of course, you can make a donation, or you can take out a monthly membership or an annual membership or a lifetime membership. You can also purchase from our shop. And of course, we always like to say that we make a small percentage from products, health products from Clive to Carl. Now, the key bit about what we do is information to be shared. So please share the information we put out. Do give us a mention as you do that, please. We are still on other platforms. We have a presence on YouTube at the moment, so that's good. Now, the conference at the weekend, this is going to be a really fantastic conference. The first thing to say is that we have a handful of tickets left. Those tickets will only be available till 5 o'clock this evening, and then they're gone. So if you've been thinking, do I or don't I, we would say to you, please come and join us, because it's going to be a really fun and very special event. And there is enough time for you to be mixing and chatting with all the speakers and the UK column team. And of course, it's in Cheltenham, really in the belly of the beast. So 5 o'clock, and those tickets are gone. If you've been thinking I should go, now's the time to buy the ticket. Get onto the UK column website. And we are going to be live streaming, which is going to be good for many people who can't get there. But at the end of the day, if you're there to really experience the event. So both options available, but those tickets still available. Now, where does that take us? Well, it takes us to other people who are active. And Diane, this conference is coming up. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, Brian, this conference is called What's Wrong with Sex Education? All Children, All Ages, All Schools. It will be in Lisburn in Northern Ireland in just a few days, on the 7th of April. So that's just right after the conference, actually. The interesting thing about this to note, which I heard Mike say on Friday, is that Lisburn is Mike Robinson's hometown. So if you've ever wanted to see where Mike Robinson is from, then you should also go to the conference. We don't know everything about the conference, but what I do know is that it's been promoted by Hugh McCarthy, who I've been working with recently. We had an interview with him last week on sexualization and indoctrination in schools in Northern Ireland. And he's really informed on this topic, and he's also writing a 3-part series of articles for us. So parts 1 and 2 are already out in writing, and part 3 will be published next week. There's a number of things that are important about this conference, including the fact that they will be talking about the specific rights that parents have in Northern Ireland, about their children can experience through the curriculum or not, which is unique to Northern Ireland. We don't have it in the rest of the devolved nations. So definitely other people getting out there and doing things, and it's good to see that happening.
Okay, Diane, thank you very much for that. And also, interview going out at 1 o'clock tomorrow is with Catherine Austin-Fitz. Of course, Catherine done a huge amount of work on all sorts of subjects around the deep state and essentially what is coming into place around the rules-based international order. So very, very knowledgeable lady, and I'm sure that's going to be a really great interview. Diane, I think it comes back to you and the terrible subject of smart meters, or maybe not so smart meters.
No, unfortunately, it looks like they're pretty stupid, actually, Brian. A viewer wrote in a few days ago to ask why we haven't covered smart meters on UK Column, and we have. If you search ukcolumn.org, there's been a variety of written and video reports related to smart meters. But I think because there's so much going on, it's worth some updates, and I did some deeper research as well. So the first thing to note is that the energy price cap is going up tomorrow, the 1st of April. According to the BBC, the annual bill for a household using a typical amount of gas and electricity will go up to £1,849 per year, which is an increase of £111. The energy price cap sets the maximum amount customers can be charged for each unit of energy, but actual bills depend on how much you actually use. So that's just for people who might not be in the UK, so that you understand what's happening. So Ofgem, which is the electricity and gas regulator in the UK, and the BBC, they're all telling us in the UK that the way to save money on your energy bills is to make sure that we are complying with their demands to have a smart meter installed in our homes, and then everything will be better. However, there are a lot of problems going on with smart meters. They are meant to, of course, send gas and electricity consumption data to the suppliers and display it to the consumers. So there's a back and forth, which is supposed to promote the consumers to help them track their energy usage and cut their use. However, smart meters were, first of all, mandated by Ed Miliband back in 2008 when he first held the post of Energy Secretary. So they've been rolling these out for 17 years, but the whole time has been full of technical failures, reluctance to adopt them by people in their houses. Just very recent reports in the last few days. For example, the East Anglian Daily Times said that certain electricity smart meters have been recalled. There's information about the recall on the UK.gov website. They've been recalled because they present a risk of fire or electric shocks. And so there is information there. Please take a look at our website on the show notes to make sure that you do not have one of these in your house. And if you do, get it out right away. The Telegraph said on Friday that millions of households could be lined up for payouts from their energy supplier for faulty smart meters under rules set under by the energy regulator, which I will come back to in just a minute. If you have a broken smart meter in your house and it's not fixed within 90 days, you will soon be able to claim £40 compensation from the supplier, according to Ofgem. The change means that millions may soon be able to claim because there's a lot of people having these problems. And official figures are saying that this might be up to 3.5 million smart meters have so-called gone dumb, and that's the words, because they have lost their ability to send the usage information back and forth between the suppliers and the consumers. So with that many, there might be a long wait for your £40 if you have a faulty smart meter. So back in January, the BBC sent out a warning to people who have an older type of meter and saying that they will need to replace it with a smart meter. So let's watch this clip from January.
What do we need to do then?
Yes, this is a warning from the regulator Ofgem telling people with a certain type of old meter. I should stress it's not all old meters, but certain types of old meters. If they have one of those in particular, they need to get in touch with their supplier and switch before June. Let me explain the details for you. Yes, this is all about older meters that look like these. In particular, if you're on a tariff like Economy 7, Economy 10, or others that have different rates at various times of the day. They run using something called the radio teleswitch service. It's basically a signal that's broadcast to energy firms, and it allows these meters to switch between peak and off-peak rates or turn your heating or hot water on and off. But the equipment is old and it's hard to maintain. So the signal is being switched off. This was originally meant to happen last March, but that deadline has now been extended to this June. The thing is, there are still 600,000 households and businesses using these old meters. And the message is you need to switch before June or you risk losing your heating and hot water.
So if you don't switch your meter, you're not going to live very long. It doesn't sound that way. So it's really interesting and important to look at how these actually are working in the background. So Ofgem has explained on their website that the Data Communications Company, or DCC, is a monopoly company. They admit that it's a monopoly. It operates under the Smart Meter Communications License, which is regulated by Ofgem. DCC is part of Capita, which is an international business process outsourcing company based in London, so public-private partnership again. The DCC is responsible for linking smart meters in homes and small businesses with energy suppliers, network operators, and energy service companies. According to Ofgem, DCC is needed to ensure that the smart meters system as a whole works smoothly and that the enduring and full benefits of smart meters are realized. So how exactly does this work? Here's a clip from the DCC's website explaining it for us.
A year. The network operates to the highest security standards in Europe. It's endorsed by the National Cyber Security Centre, part of GCHQ, and operates entirely separately from the potential pitfalls of the public internet. So how does it work? Every time energy is used or generated in homes with smart meters, they turn it into a packet of data. The data's securely wrapped using 2 layers of encryption. A communications hub creates a home area network to receive the data from the smart meters. The hub transmits the data to an in-home display, which shows how much energy is being used or sold back to the grid. The data is then transmitted from the home to a wide area network of mobile phone or radio masts, and from these to the DCC's servers. The DCC never sees or keeps the data. It transports it securely straight to energy suppliers to access. They decrypt it so they can bill consumers accurately. The detailed consumption data also helps the whole system make the best use of energy, keeping the lights on and supporting Britain's net zero goals.
Diane,
Sorry, Brian, Ben, I saw you holding your head.
Diane, I got to say, all I wanted was a cup of tea, but apparently I got to send my meter back and I've got to contact GCHQ in order to understand the digital transfer in order to boil the kettle. This is utter madness on the nation.
Absolutely, it is. And so I guess we can, I don't know if you want to stage a protest over the weekend, we can do that. That will be convenient. But I have some more details from the government to show you exactly what's going on in the background. They just recently updated its policy report, which is called Clean Power 2030 Action Plan, a new era of clean electricity. It said that something called market-wide half-hourly settlements is a key enabler for the retail market, making its timely delivery critical for the 2030 target. This is led by Ofgem. It will change the landscape because consumers will be able to take advantage of the system to get lower bills. And additionally, the smart meter rollout is critical for unlocking the innovative approaches to managing demand and will enable this successful delivery, whatever this means. It also said that the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero, so that's Ed Miliband again, is working with Ofgem to guarantee new standards of performance relating to smart meters this year. This may include standards relating to installation and maintenance, compensation, so going back to some of what I addressed earlier, actions to remove barriers to smart meter adoption. They admit in the report that this will require a lot of infrastructure in the next few years, and almost all of it will be provided by private companies. They also said, however, they were optimistic it will work out because, direct quote, the work of the vaccines task force during the pandemic demonstrated what can be achieved when tight focus, strong direction, and full collaboration come together. So last week, there were messages coming out on Ofgem through X. On Friday, for example, they said, we are proposing faster smart meter installations and better compensation for inactivity issues. New rules could mean quicker appointments and swift fixes for reported problems. These proposed new rules include shorter wait time for installation, compensation for failed installation, quicker fixes if a customer has a problem. So, these are things that they're saying will be part of the proposal. Now, going back to 2019, looking at the cost-benefit analysis smart meter rollout, which is coming from the Department for Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy, we can see here on this figure that was taken from the report that the smart meter program is literally costing us, the British taxpayers, billions of pounds, actually. This report said, however, that the smart meters will unlock a smarter and more flexible energy system for homes and businesses across Britain and provide a key contribution to the aims of the government to reduce carbon emissions to net zero by 2050. They will also play an increasingly important role beyond the end of the appraisal period. For example, the Committee on Climate Change estimates that without this flexibility, where smart meters are a key part of delivering the flexible energy system in net zero, the cost of reaching net zero by 2050 would be up to $16 billion per annum higher. They need to make sure that we're going to buy in this. So not to worry, there's a way that they're handling this. There is an organization for that called Smart Energy GB. Smart Energy GB is a nonprofit that is there to help us, the apparently stupid British public who won't buy the smart meters, according to those who want us to have them, to understand why smart meters are such a benefit to us and to the country. Now, going back to 2016, they had a report called A Smart Route to Change, the application of behavioral science in supporting Great Britain's smart meter rollout and changing the way we use energy for the better. I had to go back to the Wayback Machine to find this, and I had originally found it linked by an article that Martin Edwards wrote in 2020 in a UK column article called Behavioural Insights, the second team leading the UK government's COVID-19 response. The report says that Smart Energy DB was established in 2013, and this plan established the central place that behavioral science holds at the heart of Smart Energy DB's approach and the campaign that we have developed and are executing as the voice of the smart meter rollout. It said that they are tackling the task of changing human behavior, especially in these situations where there's a careful balance to be struck between individual autonomy and public good, and even controversy as to what is or is not in the interest of community and society as a whole. It cited research that found that 80% of people who already have a smart meter have taken at least one step to change something about their energy use, so that's good news for them, apparently. They reviewed a few different approaches to behavioral change, including one that was actually originally written by Professor Susan Mitchie. Where do we know that name from before? Which she was involved in developing. But then they decided on a different one called Mindspace, which, Brian, you've been covering since 2020, which they said was finally the best approach to changing behavior related to smart meters. So the slide from the approach that talks about applying Mindspace, it's called a SMART approach, where, taking the different steps through how people might potentially work to adapt these smart meters, what to do. There's different ways to use Mindspace that they suggested. One was called Messenger, which involves children. Once a term, there is dedicated school time where children learn about the importance of smart meters and conserving energy through specially designed resources. They will be given a take-home pack of practical hints and tips to encourage them to put what they've learned into practice at home and get the rest of the family involved. Another one is called Incentive, which is basically every home that has a smart meter, you get put into a prize draw. So that's really exciting. So you get a smart meter, your house might blow up from the smart meter, but you might win a prize. Maybe you'll get a bottle of wine. It'd be great. So very exciting. Their 2025 consumer engagement plan and budget says that their budget is £38.3 million to spend on applied behavioral psychology. And it's to make sure that we comply with these demands to use smart meters. So we talked about rewards, energy flexibility, reassurance campaigns to basically say that they don't believe anything that consumers might believe. And they've got 13 reasons why we should get smart meters, which include all of these things about tackling climate change, reducing your impact on the environment, reducing Britain's dependency on energy from overseas, and so on. But of course, ultimately, this really does go back to Agenda 2030, Sustainable Development Goals, Clean Energy Plan. We have an article here that was, this was actually a presentation that was given at the UN by an academic a few years ago in 2018, and she basically said SDG 7, that's the one about energy, is an enabling factor for sustainable development. She said that in particular, this can enable several different SDGs, 6, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13, if that means anything to anybody. And we can see she believes that implementing Agenda 2030 will be helped by encouraging people to be more energy independent, because, of course, the smart meters will make us obsess over energy use. And we also see from the World Economic Forum from January 2020, there's a report called The Impact of 5G, Creating New Value Across Industries and Society. It discussed the fourth industrial revolution, said that 5G will be critical to enable unprecedented levels of connectivity, upgrading 4G networks with functional drivers, and this all includes smart meters, the smart grid, smart energy management, smart street lighting, electric vehicles, and finally, drone monitoring capabilities. So I guess the drones will make sure that we've got our smart meters, and then what happens from there, we don't know. But that's what's going on, Brian.
I'll just pause for 20 seconds because, of course, you're describing more madness, 600,000 duff meters in place, but apparently they're going to change them all by June. I don't think so. And what is all this about? Well, of course, it's those sustainable development goals, which are clearly evident that they're unsustainable. But we'll do more on this in due course, because understanding what's being done is the key to stopping it, along with saying, no, we don't want this junk in our homes. Let's move at the end of the news, Ben, to, a local area where there's good things taking place, and we can also see people standing up to be counted.
Yes. I did what Diane does. I went on a little trip. I went on an outing. I went to Totnes on Saturday, jumped on the train over to East Devon, had a lovely time. And I went to meet a man who lives in a food forest. And he actually feeds himself with food that he picks from the garden that he's created around his dwelling. And that's what he eats, and that's how he exists. It's amazing. Like, people are actually doing this stuff at a micro level. And there's some bigger stuff going on too, because also happening in Totnes is this thing running. So this is a similar setup. This is another food forest in the Dartington estate at Dartington House. And basically, this has been running for about 30 years, and everything from the tree canopy to the undergrowth is edible. Right, that's the guy who founded it, Martin Crawford. This is not the guy I met, by the way. This is the sort of slightly more upscale establishment version of what I was talking about. But the game that we want to play is to live in a state of perpetual symbiosis with the land and to get away from this kind of monocrop, industrialized monocrop model that we've currently got for agriculture, right? And it's probably fair to say that where we're going to end up, or where we should end up, is a balance between the two. But this organisation at Dartington has been doing some fantastic work to experiment in this area for about 30 years. So obviously what Dartington are going to do in the face of that is to cancel that programme, because why invest 30 years of time and energy in building something like that when you could just cancel it, And this was in The Guardian a couple of weeks ago, from the 19th of March. So the pioneering Devon Food Forest Garden has been at risk after the landowner inexplicably serves notice on it, right? So who is the landowner? Who's running Dartington? Well, this is interesting. So let's look at the trustees. We've got Lord Treesman, who's the chair of trustees. He's been there since 2022. He's a Maoist and was a member of the Communist Party in the 70s. And then he ran number 10 for Tony Blair. So he's a big-time Labour guy, communist, Maoist, cancelling programs food production. There's a trend emerging here, I think. Oh, look, isn't that surprising? And he actually said, Dartington, this is a quote from him at the bottom, Dartington's contribution to a just and sustainable future is legendary. What's Dartington known for? Is it something to do with the...
It's got a very, as far as I know, Ben, it's got a very dark history. It's been involved in all sorts of strange political things. Was home of spies many years ago. Kim Philby and team visited, and there's some very, very strange politics around.
And Kim Philby, and they were colluding with the Russians, with the communists, right? That was the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Right, okay.
But
that's interesting.
I believe, I may be incorrect in this, I believe the Young Foundation or people involved with the Young Foundation have also been involved with it. So a lot of very interesting and strange history around Dartington, but clearly they believe in sustainability as long as it's the correct sustainability.
Well, quite. And then a few more trustees. You've got this chap here, Chris Moore, who's a PwC partner, World Economic Forum partner. And then Peter Goldsborough on the right-hand side. He was the top guy at BCG in London for about 40 years, right? And again, World Economic Forum partner. So you've got this really odd mix of hardline communists and multinational corporates coming together to suppress our ability to be self-reliant and to live off the land. It's really quite remarkable, isn't it? Now, luckily, there has been a huge backlash against this, not least from the local community in Totnes. And there was some good news yesterday where it came out that it's been confirmed that the lease has been secured, at least until it ends in 3.5 years, right? So that's good news for now, but it's still up for debate and with the trustees as to what's going to happen next. So we'll keep our eye on this. And there's also some great work going on at a grassroots level on the street. And I met this amazing crew of people on the main street in Totnes who are there every Saturday giving out copies of the light paper, sharing good information. They've been in a running battle with the council for the past few years, who've been coming up and trying to unlawfully shut them down and basically serving them with illegal notices that haven't been signed and aren't addressed to anyone, and basically just trying to stop them from operating collaborating, and they're doing a fantastic job. So kudos to you. And also I had the pleasure of meeting Jason Leosatos as well, who's been doing some great work, and hopefully we'll be able to speak to him in a few weeks and maybe can record an interview or something. But thank you everyone in Totnes for having me. It was a great day on Saturday. More to come.
Ben, thank you very much. And yeah, what this shows is that if you get out there and start to do something, you can have an effect. Now, we're going to end on a couple of quick little images here. This one was sent to me. I don't know whether the quote is true, but I couldn't resist it. Apparently, Harry S. Truman, you can't get rich in politics unless you're a crook. And Diane, I think you've got the last image for today's news. Let's pop it up on screen. Tell us about it.
Yeah, a lot of people on the left in America are really worrying about the fact that Donald Trump and his administration is looking at the Department of Education. And the question is, what on earth will we do without the Department of Education and all of these trans flags and rainbow flags and mask-wearing teachers? I don't know what's going to happen to the schools in America if this goes away, Brian. I don't know. I'm a bit worried. How about you?
I'm certainly very worried. Let's end there on a bit of black humour. We must finish the news today. We've overrun slightly, but a huge thank you to the audience wherever you are in the world. Thank you for tuning into UK Column. Do recommend us to other people. Do come and join us and take out a membership, because that financial support keeps us going. And if you haven't bought a ticket for Saturday's UK Column on location event, buy that ticket and come and meet us in person. It makes such a difference to be able to talk to people on a one-to-one basis. It is much better than an online conference, but we do understand some people can only see us online. We'll leave it there. Ben, Diane, thank you very much for joining me. We will be back for UK Column News at the same time on Wednesday. If you're a member, stay with us because we'll have UK Column Extra in a few moments. Thank you. Bye-bye.